It started as a whisper, then within hours, it became something far louder. A rumor began circulating online suggesting that a child named Louis might somehow be connected to Sam Heughan and Caitríona Balfe in a way no one had ever publicly acknowledged. The claim sounded shocking, almost impossible, yet it spread with surprising speed across fan communities. And as more people picked it up, the story quickly grew beyond speculation into something that felt, at least to some, disturbingly real. What made the situation even more intense was how it collided with reality. Caitríona Balfe is known to have a private family life with her husband, Tony McGill, a fact that has always been handled with care and respect in the public eye. Sam, on the other hand, has remained extremely guarded about his personal life, rarely confirming anything beyond what he chooses to share. And yet, despite these clear boundaries, the rumor managed to connect the names in a way that blurred those lines completely. At first, the theory seemed to come from fragments, small details taken out of context, combined with long-standing fan speculation. Old interviews were revisited, timelines were re-examined, and moments that once appeared ordinary were suddenly given new meaning. It didn't take much for the narrative to begin forming, because the connection between Sam and Caitríona has always been a subject of intense curiosity. And once that curiosity is activated, even the smallest detail can become part of a much larger story. The speed at which the rumor spread was almost as striking as the rumor itself. Within a short time, discussions began appearing across multiple platforms, each version of the story slightly different, each adding a new layer of assumption. Some fans treated it as a serious possibility, while others questioned how something so personal could exist without any credible confirmation. But regardless of where people stood, the conversation was growing, and it wasn't slowing down. Then came the part that made everything feel even more complicated. Supporters of the theory began pointing to what they believed were patterns, suggesting that certain details from the past aligned too closely to ignore. They spoke about timing, about appearances, about moments that seemed insignificant before but now felt connected. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to keep the narrative alive, especially for those already inclined to believe there was more to the story. At the same time, a different perspective started to emerge. Some fans pushed back, arguing that what was being presented as evidence was nothing more than coincidence, shaped into a narrative through selective interpretation. They pointed out how easily unrelated details can be combined to create something that feels convincing, even when there's no real foundation behind it. And in a situation like this, where emotions and expectations are already high, that kind of interpretation can spread quickly. What made the entire situation so unsettling was how personal it became. This wasn't just speculation about a project or a public appearance, it involved real people, real lives, and a claim that carried serious implications. And yet, it was being discussed with the same intensity as any other piece of entertainment news, as if the line between reality and narrative had blurred completely. Still, the rumor continued to grow, fueled by the absence of immediate clarification. In the world of online discussion, silence often creates its own meaning, allowing speculation to expand into the space where answers should be. And as more people joined the conversation, the story began to feel less like a question and more like something that needed to be resolved. Then came a turning point, a detail that began to shift the tone of the entire discussion. As the narrative reached its peak, attention started to move towards someone who had remained largely outside of the speculation until now, Tony McGill. His name, already part of the reality that grounded Caitríona's personal life, suddenly became central to the conversation. And with that shift, the story began to move in a different direction. Because when a rumor grows this large, it eventually reaches a point where speculation alone isn't enough. It demands clarity, context, and something that can separate what feels true from what actually is. And now, with everything building toward that moment, one question remains impossible to ignore. Was this ever based on reality, or was it a story created from fragments that were never meant to fit together? As the speculation reached its peak, attention finally shifted toward something more grounded, Tony McGill's response, or more precisely, the way his presence reshaped the entire narrative. Whether through direct words or subtle clarification, the effect was immediate. The conversation, which had been spiraling through layers of assumption, suddenly began to slow, as if reality had quietly stepped back into focus. And with that shift, the story started to look very different. Instead of confirming anything dramatic, the response, however it was delivered, seemed to reinforce something much simpler. That the narrative connecting Sam, Caitríona, and Louis had grown far beyond its original context. What had been presented as a possibility began to unravel under closer examination, revealing how much of it had been built on interpretation rather than fact. And once that realization took hold, the tone of the conversation began to change. Some fans were quick to acknowledge that the theory may have gone too far, that the pieces used to support it never truly formed a complete picture. They pointed out how easily timelines can be misread, how moments can be taken out of context, and how quickly a compelling story can take shape when enough people begin to believe in it. In that sense, the rumor wasn't based on a single false claim, it was built from many small assumptions that, when combined, created something that felt real. Others, however, were slower to let go of the idea. For them, the lack of a dramatic denial left space for continued doubt, a sense that maybe not everything had been fully explained. But even within that uncertainty, the intensity of the original claim began to fade. The focus shifted away from certainty and toward possibility, and then gradually, toward skepticism. What makes this moment so revealing isn't just the clarification itself, but what it exposes about how these narratives form. In a space where public figures are constantly observed, every detail can become part of a larger story, especially when there is already a foundation of curiosity. The connection between Sam and Caitríona has always drawn attention, and that attention creates an environment where even unrelated details can be pulled into the same narrative. There's also a deeper layer to consider, the role of expectation. Fans don't just observe, they imagine, they connect, they build stories that feel meaningful based on what they see. And while that engagement is part of what makes these communities so active, it also means that the line between observation and creation can become blurred. What starts as curiosity can evolve into something much more defined, even without concrete evidence. Tony McGill's presence in this situation serves as a reminder of that boundary. Not as a dramatic interruption, but as a point of reality that recenters the story. It shifts the focus away from speculation and back toward what is known, what is confirmed, what exists outside of interpretation. And in doing so, it challenges the narrative that had been building so quickly. At the same time, the aftermath of the rumor leaves behind something worth reflecting on. Not just about this specific situation, but about how easily stories can form when pieces are taken out of context and connected in ways they were never meant to be. It shows how powerful timing, assumption, and repetition can be in shaping what people believe to be true. Now, as the conversation begins to settle, the question is no longer about whether the rumor was real. It's about how it became believable in the first place. How something so personal, so serious, could spread so widely without a clear foundation, and what that says about the way these narratives are created. Because in the end, the truth didn't need to be hidden, it simply needed to be understood. And sometimes, the most surprising part of a story isn't what was revealed, but how easily it was imagined. Because in the end, the truth didn't need to be hidden, it simply needed to be understood. And sometimes, the most surprising part of a story isn't what was revealed but how easily it was imagined, because in the end, the truth didn't need to be hidden, it simply needed to be understood. And sometimes, the most surprising part of a story isn't what was revealed but how easily it was imagined.